Welcome to Pearsall Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we're here for another Monday minisode.
That's right. We're talking about, one of those things that are really important to us on this Monday mini, and that is our reputation. So as a reseller, reputation is really important to us. And so one of the things that can be really a big hit for us on our store, in our own ego, even when it comes to reselling, is when we get some negative feedback from a customer. Now, the ego part we can swallow, but if it's impacting our store, you start getting some negative feedbacks. Those things may or may not hurt you in the algorithm. We're not sure. It seems to be you get a certain point for sure it's going to have a negative impact. But even just psychologically for the customers who are looking, if they see, if they look at your recent, especially the top like 5 reviews, and you've got a couple on there that are negative, that could lose you some sales. And so we have found that there are ways that you can get that negative feedback removed as a reseller. And so today we're going to be talking about the things that you should be doing in order to ensure that you can get that negative feedback removed if it's possible.
So now we've done an episode like this before. I think we've actually had a mini-sode that was exactly this, but things have changed since that mini-sode. And a lot of the principles are still the same, but for example, you used to, if you're a concierge, be able to call them and they would have some, negative feedbacks that, as long as it was reasonable, like it wasn't anything crazy, but it was a situation where, you did everything right. You try to make things right with the buyer. The buyer, you reach out to the buyer never reached back to you, and they just left you a negative feedback. Back in the day under concierge, eBay would generally remove those. Or, if you offered free returns, eBay will remove those. But that has changed now. And the way it's changed is that eBay now has, according to what they told me when I was on the phone with them last, is they actually have a team that reviews everything. And that team is the same all across the board. And what I mean is this. Back in the day, if you got a negative feedback, you could call an eBay rep, and that eBay rep would maybe say no. They're not going to change it. You could hang up, call again. They would say no. You can hang up, call again, and then the third person might change it. Or you can contact eBay for Business. And eBay for Business, after they read everything, they might say, you know what? No, we'll remove that neutral negative feedback. Well, now that has changed. They have a team, and unless it is something that falls under the 4 categories, and we'll talk about that, they're not going to remove it. And so you're going to have to approach the seller about removing it, which before, I would say I hardly ever reached out to a seller. A buyer. I hardly ever reached out to a buyer asking them to revise feedback. Like that never happened. Where now that's going to be something I think 99% of the time is what's gonna make it happen. So
I don't know. I'm gonna push back. So I know we have a bit of a heated discussion that's gonna, if you listen to our Wednesday episode coming up here, Orlando and I talk about this a little bit in that section. But I almost don't know if I don't want to say you're jaded on this one, Orlando, but it could be that you've had a couple of bad experiences, because I would still say maybe eBay isn't as open to removing feedback. You're probably right about that. However, there's still going to be instances where calling eBay will be effective, right? Like calling eBay, asking for a negative feedback to be removed. It may not be as often as it was in the past, but I wouldn't eliminate that and say 99% of the time it's not going to work. Maybe time will tell, and I will be proven wrong on that.
Well,
and
I'll say
eBay will never remove feedback.
I'll say it won't work if you've been denied on eBay Seller Help. So the first tool you'll go to is eBay Seller Help. So if you Google Seller Help, eBay Seller Help, it takes you to this page, and then you'll go and you'll click on Request Assistance. And so when you go to that Request Assistance, it's going to give you 4 options as to why, your feedback should be removed. And if it falls under these, generally they'll fall into it, unless, it's something, like I said, it's something crazy that doesn't fall under that, or you did something really wrong, and obviously they're not going to remove it for you. Okay. So you have to make sure it falls under those 4. So one of them is inappropriate, or I think it says, I'm going to read it from you directly here, or profane remarks. Another one is, something that was out of your control. Another option is, let me just pull it up before we move forward, because I don't want to give incorrect information. But it has to fall under these categories, and they have pretty strict guidelines on what that means when they're saying, hey, it has to fall under these guidelines. And you might think it falls under these guidelines, but they don't think, it's not going to end up getting removed. It's going to stay on there. So those are, I can't even pull it up because I have no negative feedback to challenge. So I can't look this up, but it is inappropriate profane remarks, a situation out of your control. And something that you want to, this obviously has to be something that is very egregious. Okay. And if it doesn't fall into those categories, eBay won't remove it. And so let's say they cancel it and they say, eBay gets back to you and they're like, hey, we reviewed everything. We looked at everything and we can't remove this negative or this neutral feedback. Back in the day, you could call and go like, hey, I got denied. I'm asking this to get removed. Well, that won't happen anymore. They'll just say, no, it seems that we already went through the process and you already denied, and that's it. Like that. That's a new thing.
Right. But is it possible that, if you've got a really unique situation, because there are some situations it's cut and dry. This person dropped an F-bomb and called me all these slurs on the feedback. Okay, that's an easy one to submit. But some of them are a little more nuanced. Some of them are a little bit like it's a longer conversation between back and forth and things that were messages. And it might be easier to talk to somebody rather than just write something up in the seller help. So it could be that maybe instead of going to seller help first, that a call first might be better.
In my experience and experience of tons of sellers, it used to be that way. And no, you can. I'm not saying don't. I mean, I still would. But I think the easiest avenue, and this is why we were going to talk about this today, is doing the feedback revision request. Because again, you're spending a lot of time, right? And I would hate for sellers to spend a lot of time calling eBay over and over again, and eBay eventually goes like, "No, we're not. We already denied you once. We're not going to help you again." Right? It used to be you could ask for a supervisor, and a supervisor would help you, but now the supervisor, they're just going to reinforce what the person under them says. So I could be wrong. Let us know in the comments what has been your experience. I'm pretty sure when people comment, it's going to be, yeah, every time I call, it's been a nothing. And again, unless it's something egregious, unless it's something terrible. But if it's something that it's just somebody is stating something that isn't necessarily a lie, but it's not true, but they're saying something about your business, or they didn't like the color about something, or they didn't like the way something was packed or something like that, like eBay is going to let it stay. They're going to let it stand. And that could affect your business. So have you done an eBay feedback revision request yet, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I have. And I think that's a very useful tool to use. It's not going to work really well on its own without other communication with the buyer. And so I would say one of the important things to do is you need to reach out to the buyer and kind of explain the situation, what's going on, and try and make things right first. When you do that revision request could be a very powerful tool, right? Because if you're able to smooth things over, sometimes people are upset in the moment. You then have an opportunity to go back through and make things right with them, whether it's, hey, I'll refund you, or I've done this. I can offer you a coupon. I'm sorry this happened. Even if they're very angry with you back and forth with comments, if you continue to be calm, sometimes it's enough for somebody to calm down. When you make a request like, hey, would you mind removing this? I've been pretty successful with having people remove feedback. I haven't had tons of negative feedback recently to need to use it, but I've had at least one experience where that has worked. So I would say it's a very powerful tool, especially if you make that human connection with the buyer. And part of that is, being open, being honest, and trying to do everything you can to make things right. And I would say in a lot of ways, this probably was a best practice, even while eBay was removing things. Like it's almost, it may have been easier for us to call eBay with concierge and say like, hey, I need this removed. Cool, thanks. And then hang up, and 5 minutes later, you're done. As opposed to, hey, I need to go back and forth with this buyer a handful of times and make things right and make sure they're willing to remove it. But that's always probably the best option if they remove it instead of eBay anyways.
No, I agree. And now it's the only option. But I want to give people practical steps. So I know you do some of these, and my first thing is I message them first before I do the feedback revision request, and then I'll also do the feedback revision request. Now, the feedback revision request, if you're wondering where that is, if you go to your feedback on the top right of your feedback, and it's going to give you the option of doing that if you got a neutral or a negative feedback. Now, the reason I say message them and do the revision request, the revision request might get missed, right? It may go just to their email. They're not checking their eBay store, and they're not going to see it. But if you get them on two fronts, right, they have the chance of seeing it. Sometimes they don't see it, right? I've had people that never message me, and they still won't message me even after I put the feedback revision request. But you want to make sure you're making every attempt you can to get a hold of the person, because they're the ones that are going to have to fix it. Like, you don't put a feedback revision request and eBay looks at it and changes it. This is between you and the buyer. eBay is out of the whole equation. So, for example, the last one I had, eBay, after having a huge conversation with eBay, going through seller help, eBay, this has actually happened to me twice in the last 2 months. eBay refused to remove the neutral. So I reached out to the buyer and I said, hey, listen, I'm really sorry about what happened. Please know I did my due diligence. Both of these were, one of them was an item that I ended up not finding. I don't know what happened. I don't know if eBay glitched. I don't know if I sold it and I relisted it. I don't know if it was a return that I don't know what happened. The other one was, somebody thought the shipping was too much and it took too long to ship and all this. And so I had to explain to them that it was a Friday and, it's Friday night and UPS doesn't ship out on the weekends, and that it was ground and it takes some time. So anyways, I first, like Mike said, you reach out and you apologize for. I always say apologize, right? You're not saying you're not apologizing for who you are. You're not apologizing. You're just saying you're apologizing for the experience that they had. Whether that experience is real or not, it doesn't matter. You just say, I'm sorry about what you experienced. What can I do to make things right? And that's when you could actually drop a couple of things. Now, you can't say, hey, if I give you a coupon, will you revise my feedback? You can't say, hey, I'll drop you $5 in PayPal if you remove that feedback. Like, that goes against terms of service, and you might get suspended for doing that. But if you go, hey, I want to make things right with you. I've already refunded you. I've actually decided to send you a coupon in case you want to buy anything from my store. I just want to make sure you had a pleasant experience. You can word it that way, but don't connect that what you're doing is trying to get that feedback change. You have to word it in a way where you're just expressing that you're trying to work out great customer service with the individual. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's great. And then, once you've done that, once you've tried to make everything right, you've reached out to them. I don't want to say it's a last ditch resort, but it kind of is. I feel like it's not it's not a good idea to start with this, because I feel like almost playing the sympathy card can go against you. However, it is,
if they're a cruel, mean person, they have no soul.
Right, but at the same time, like, if that's the very first thing you go to is like,
no, not the first
please,
one.
please bag right. But as a last resort thing, I think it is useful to go to, here's why it's important to me. I understand you're upset about this item. I'm doing what I can to make this right. I'm sorry that I've been unable to make it right. However, I'm a small-time reseller. This is the business that I run. I need this income in order to pay for my bills, to support my family. And unfortunately, negative feedback has a huge impact on my store. My sales go down when negative impact happens. So explaining the situation to a buyer, again, it's not that your problems aren't their problems, right? But the human connection, if you can make that, sometimes somebody could be like, yeah, I'm still upset about this thing that happened, but also I don't want to like mess this guy's business up. Is my upset worth enough for that? So again, like, I don't think this is something you should jump to of like, hey, I've got a sick kid and I need my medical bills. Like, that could come off as like cheesy and wrong and not feel legitimate, but it is useful. And I think that those types of things, I mean, I've used that not specifically for negative feedback, but I have used that with, not to get feedback removed, but even with an upset customer of like, hey, I understand. I'm sorry. Like, things have been really rough around the house, or in life, and I'm trying to get these items out and there was a mistake made. That is not your fault. That's my fault. But it's just me and my wife running this business, because sometimes people have this idea that you're a big time seller. So once you make that, hey, it's me, I'm a human, right? That can be helpful. Or I've used those same types of things as at garage sales, right? When people recognize like, hey, the reason I need to get it at this price is I'm a reseller, and this is what reselling does for me, and this is what allows for me to pay for this for my kid. And so I understand if you can't sell it for that, but this is why I have to buy it for that. And so when you're open like that, it can be useful. Again, you got to read the room though. There's times when that could be taken the wrong way.
Yeah, no. I had somebody throw it back at me and go like, well, what? It's not my problem that your family circumstances and blah blah. And I said, no, I'm not trying to get. I messaged them back. I'm saying, listen, I'm not trying to get sympathy from you. I'm just telling you what the circumstances are, and the reality is that this will affect my business. And so I'm not trying to get you feel bad for me. I'm just trying to get you to see what's going on. And I remember the buyer messaged me and go, he gave me that quote, like, you'll never know what somebody's gone through unless you've walked a mile in their shoes, and gave me this long quote and all this stuff. And sometimes you got to eat that humble pie though, right? To me, I'd rather eat that humble pie. And even when I've been 100% right, and the buyer has been just a jerk and they've been wrong, and they use this feedback to lecture me, I usually say, thanks so much. I really appreciate you letting me know on what I need to work on. Thanks so much. I'll make sure that next time I pay attention to this. As part of this, I really would, appreciate if you would revise this feedback, because it would be a great help. And that's fine. To me, it's like, yeah, did I learn from this experience? Sure. How much did I learn? I don't know. I would say, it was life-changing. Maybe this person thought my life would be changed by their lecture. But you eat that humble pie, and, you, in the long run, you understand that your business is important. Having good customer service is important. And so in the end, take it as a learning experience. But, I will say you're right. That's a better way of wording it, is that the human connection is what people miss. A lot of the times, people don't know when, when you're a lot of the used sellers, right? They're doing this because, one, maybe they couldn't find work, or maybe, they're a single parent, or maybe, they have student loans they're trying to alleviate the burden of, or whatever the reason is. Like, if people understand the humanity, they're more willing to work with you. And, I would just say, yeah, I agree. It shouldn't be the upfront thing, but I think at a certain point, you just got to be real with people, because in the end, getting that feedback removed to me is worth it. And it doesn't hurt. So, keep it cool as always. Be concise. Don't write a huge, long letter. Like, keep it short. I would say 3-4 sentences at most. Because like Mike said, it seems like you're overdoing it if you just write too long of a message. But we want to give you guys practical steps. We want to make sure that you're keeping your feedback up, you're keeping your reputation, which hopefully will allow you to continue having sales. So hopefully this mini-sode was helpful to all of you. You have any more to add, Mike?
No, I think that's good.
All right. So hopefully you keep that feedback up. And with that being said, make sure to be real,
be relevant,
and be reselling. Peace.